Welcome to the Full-Time FBA Show. In each episode, it's our goal to help you turn part-time hours into a full-time income selling almost anything on Amazon. And now, your hosts of the show, Stephen and Rebecca Smotherman.
Welcome to episode number 255 of the Full-Time FBA Show. Today, we're talking about what not to sell on Amazon as a beginner. And to help us with this conversation is my wife and co-host and business partner, Rebecca. How you doing, Rebecca?
I'm glad to be here. I'm glad we're getting into this topic today. I think it's going to be an interesting one for some people.
Yeah, and even if you are not a beginner, you're still going to learn something new on this episode of the Full-Time FBA Show.
Before we get into our topic today, I wanted to make sure you are aware we have a newsletter. You can sign up at fulltimefba.com. We send out an email about once a week, sometimes twice a week, just depends, but usually once a week, and it will give you information about our podcast, any new videos that we have out, all sorts of training information for upcoming workshops. You don't want to miss out, so be sure your name is on that list and your email. fulltimefba.com is where you can subscribe.
That's good.
Yeah, name and email. Don't just give us your name, because then we won't know how to get a hold of you.
Yes, and that's all we're going to ask you, your name and your email. That's it.
That's it. All right. On that note, let's get into the topic for today. So when you first start selling on Amazon, many new sellers ask the obvious question, what should I sell? What am I going to sell on Amazon? But many new sellers don't ever think about an equally important question, which is, what should I not sell on Amazon as a beginner? Today, we're going to let you know about 6 types of items that you should not sell on Amazon as a newbie. And we're not just talking about restricted items. That's something we get asked about all the time. Of course, you're not going to be selling restricted items if you are restricted. But, those are the items you're not allowed to sell on Amazon yet. And we're going to be focusing this episode on the types of items that you might be allowed to sell, but you probably shouldn't, for one reason or another. And we'll share what those reasons are too. Now, before we get into the list of items that newer sellers should avoid selling, please hear us that we're not saying you should never sell these items. Most of what we're going to tell you to stay away from selling might actually be a good idea to add to your inventory once you get past the beginner stages and you're more comfortable with the ins and outs of selling on Amazon. But as a beginner, don't start with these items or you'll probably get super frustrated and want to quit. And we don't want you to quit. That's why we're telling you these things. Mm-hmm. Okay, Stephen, kick us off. What is an item that a newer Amazon seller should not sell?
Yeah, I'm going to start off this podcast with a little bit of a controversial opinion, and that is this. As a new seller, don't sell electronic items on Amazon. And you might hear this and wonder, why in the world would I tell new sellers not to sell items in one of the higher priced categories on Amazon? And the simple reason is this. Of the over 30 main Amazon categories, the category that ranks number 2 in returns is the electronics category. Now, there's returns in all categories. So why is this a big deal? Well, returns are a pain. And returns when it comes to an item in the electronics category, it's a huge hassle. From buyers returning broken items or returning counterfeit items even, but the main thing with electronics is how UPS or the United States Postal Service or even Amazon Shipping handles these electronics. It's maddening when they are breaking the item. The shipping person or shipping employee is breaking the item because how poorly they're treating the items that are in the shipping boxes. They don't know that there's electronics inside, but since it's not like a glass jar that's broken, those are obvious. It's broken, an item broke in the shipping box. And so an electronic item with all the sensitive inner workings, electronics, they're getting messed up, but it's not obvious. And the only time it's discovered that the electronic item is broken is when the customer gets it, turns it on, or tries to turn it on, and it doesn't work. So the customer returns the item to you. You get a ding on your seller account for selling broken merchandise. And now you have a broken item that you simply can't sell. And so at least not on Amazon and nowhere for the near the price you want to sell it for. And so if you find an item in the electronics category as a beginner, stay away. Maybe wait till later to sell these items.
The second thing we would recommend that beginners not sell on Amazon are items in the clothing and shoes category. Now, the exact name of that Amazon category is clothing, shoes, and jewelry, but for this point, we're mainly telling you to stay away from selling clothing and shoes. There are multiple reasons why this is not a good type of item to sell for beginners. And the first reason is similar to what we just talked about with electronics. There are lots of returns. In fact, Steven said that electronics is the number 2 most returned category on Amazon, and clothing and shoes is the number 1 most returned selling category. And the reasons are obvious. People like to try things on and look at themselves in the mirror before they decide if they want to keep it. Not only that, but the second reason why the clothing and shoes category is not a good type of item for new sellers to try and sell is because high majority of Amazon customers tend to take off the tags of those clothing or shoes when they're trying it on, and then they still return it. But if you've had the tags removed and you look at the Amazon guidelines, those items are no longer new. When the tag is removed, it's not new. And so if you get clothing or shoes returned to you with those tags removed, you can no longer sell it as new on Amazon. And you also cannot sell used clothing. Amazon will not allow you to sell used clothing or shoes. So once that item has had the tags removed, you can't sell it as new. You also can't sell it as used. So you're left with having to sell it somewhere else or give it to your kids to wear.
If the shoe fits.
If the shoe fits. A third reason that it's not a good idea for new sellers to attempt to sell shoes or clothing is this. These items have variations on their Amazon product page. And there's a lot we can say on this topic, but overall, each shoe or clothing listing on Amazon can potentially have dozens and dozens of variations depending on the number of colors, sizes, and styles available and how it's arranged on that product page. So for example, when you are looking at the sales rank for a pair of shoes that you're wanting to source, you're not looking at the sales rank for that one particular pair of shoes in that child variation. You're looking at the sales rank for all of those variations combined. And that's why variations can be so difficult is when it comes to sales rank. So if the Amazon product page says that a pair of shoes is ranked 6,000 in clothing, shoes, and jewelry, you have no way to know which size, which color, or which style of those shoes are actually receiving the sales that gave it that good rank. All you know is that some combination of all of those variations has that rank of 6,000. And to further complicate matters, Keepa, which is our favorite online tool that tracks Amazon sales numbers, they don't show sales rank history for individual shoes or clothing. They just really can't because of the way the sales rank data is shown through Amazon. So if you don't have a solid foundation in selling on Amazon and know how sales rank works and what other factors to look at to find whether something can sell well or not, it can just be really hard to jump into shoes and clothing and navigate those difficulties of understanding how sales rank is going to connect to the exact variation that you have that you might want to sell. So if what I'm saying right now is confusing you as I'm explaining it, then you probably get the point of how confusing selling clothing or shoes is as a newer Amazon seller. If you've been selling for a while, this is something you can learn. But if you're just getting started, it's a much steeper learning curve. And most of us just need some experience in understanding sales rank in those categories that don't have variations before we move into selling shoes and clothing.
Yeah. Another item that would be good not to sell as a newer seller on Amazon is this: grocery items. Now, the good news on grocery items is that most grocery items cannot be returned as a part of Amazon's buyer guidelines. So that's good. But the reason we tell newer sellers to stay away from selling any item in the grocery category is this: expiration dates. Amazon has very strict rules when it comes to selling items that include expiration dates. And the rules are so complicated since different grocery items have different kind of expiration dates and shelf life data to consider. Again, Amazon seller newbies instead focus on selling items that are not super complicated. Complicated is the perfect word to describe how Amazon's rules are for grocery items.
And along those same lines, a fourth kind of item that we would recommend you not start out selling as a beginner is items in the health and beauty category for that same reason. They have expiration dates. Amazon also has some pretty strict rules for health and beauty items when it comes to how close that item can be to its expiration date when you're sending it in. And it's all related to the shelf life of that item and kind of a percentage of that shelf life, how long it can be at the warehouse versus when it's going to reach the person. It's just complicated and it's a lot to keep track of when you're getting started. So we recommend staying away from those items with expiration dates in health and beauty as well.
Yeah, all these things are figure-outable. Is that a word?
It is now.
Okay, it's figure-outable, but don't worry about it now as a beginner. So a fifth kind of item that newer Amazon sellers should probably wait to sell until they're more comfortable running their Amazon business is this: oversized items. Now, you might remember back in episode 51 where I outlined that oversized items can possibly bring in supersized profits, and I still believe that. But only when sourcing and selling these oversized items being done the right way. So you can totally listen to that episode going to fulltimefba.com/51. But just remember, if you are a newbie Amazon seller, to just wait on sourcing these oversized items until you're more comfortable with selling standard-sized items. Overall, the main reason to wait for oversized items is because Amazon sellers actually have to ship these oversized items to different Amazon warehouses than standard-sized items. Yes, there are FBA warehouses that only store and ship items that Amazon deems as oversized. So, yes, there are oversized FBA warehouses. I don't mean the warehouse is oversized. It's just that the warehouses only store and ship items that are oversized. Also, oversized items sometimes have oversized FBA fees as well. And so you want to make sure that you know these fees before you start sourcing. So again, just get comfortable selling a regular standard-sized item before you expand into oversized items.
So the last item we wanted to talk about is seasonal items, which we do not recommend you sell as a newer Amazon seller. Now, this isn't really a specific Amazon category, but rather it's an item that usually sells the most while it's, quote, in season. That's what we mean by seasonal. And so if it sells the most when it's in season, it's also going to sell much slower when it's out of season. So a good example of that would be snow boots. They're going to sell really well in winter because that's when snow boot season is. But they don't sell as much during the spring, the fall, or the summer because that's out of season. Typically, it doesn't snow in those seasons. So if I listed certain items to you, you would probably be able to just tell what time of year they would sell best. But selling those seasonal items on Amazon requires a lot more than just knowing when that selling season is. So you really need to know when is the best time to start sourcing the seasonal item and when is the best time to start slashing the prices and when to aim to be sold out of that seasonal item. And all of that can get kind of tricky. It's something that you will learn over time, but when you're first getting started, it's a little bit more complicated. You've probably heard us say on this podcast that we always try to sell out of our items within 30 to 60 days of them hitting the FBA warehouse. But when you're adding in that seasonal aspect to your sourcing planning, it's just harder to understand as a newbie seller. And alongside also trying to learn everything that you need to know to run the rest of your Amazon business. So we recommend waiting on those seasonal items.
So are you saying that it's probably better for the seller to wait until they are past the season of being a newbie before they add seasonal sourcing to their Amazon business?
Yeah, I get your pun, and I wish that the listeners could hear my eyes rolling.
Yeah, they're rolling pretty loudly.
Okay, so those are the 6 types of items that we suggest newer Amazon sellers avoid sourcing to sell on Amazon. When you avoid those type of items, it's going to help you start your Amazon journey much more smoothly. And it will help you instead to focus on other more profitable uses of your sourcing time and energy. Again, like we mentioned before, once you get the hang of selling on Amazon and you're looking to expand the kinds of items that you sell, only then should you consider slowly adding one or more of these kind of items into your Amazon sourcing.
Right. So we've told you the 6 types of items to stay away from, but that still leaves hundreds, maybe thousands of other types of items that you can sell with very little problems as a newer Amazon seller. And if you're wanting even more help, we'd love to invite you to join the Full-Time FBA coaching program, where we give you everything you need to know and understand to both start and grow a successful Amazon business, as well as giving you the guidance, accountability, encouragement, and mentorship you need to build a thriving Amazon business. So for more information, check out fulltimefba.com/coaching today.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the Full-Time FBA Show. As a reminder, the show notes and any of the links that were mentioned for this episode can be found at fulltimefba.com/255 because this is episode number 255.
And next week on the show, we're going to answer the question, which is better, FBA, where you send all your stuff to Amazon and they ship it for you, or FBM, fulfilled by merchant, where you get to be the one to ship it to your customers? Which one is better? We'll talk about that next week on the Full-Time FBA Show.
That's all for this episode of the Full-Time FBA Show. So head over to fulltimefba.com/podcast, where you'll find the show notes and links from this episode. While you're there, subscribe to our newsletter where you'll get several free downloads of our popular and helpful Amazon FBA resources. Now, take action on what you've learned today so you can find success at turning part-time hours into a full-time income with Amazon FBA.